Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Eric Balcavage, and we're back for another episode of the Thyroid Answers podcast. I'm with my partner and co-host, Dr. Erica Riggleman. Hi, Dr. Riggleman.
Hello.
So we are back for our fifth episode, and today we're going to talk about one of those things that, or a topic that a lot of people have questions regarding, and that is when you get diagnosed as having a hypothyroid condition. Somebody actually says, yes, your TSH is high, your T4 is low, you have hypothyroidism. What can you do or what should you do to start to improve your health? So we'll try to keep this one to about 30 minutes, but we're going to touch on about 3 or 4 big categories and hopefully leave you with some things that you can do almost right away to start improving your health and your well-being and start working towards solving your hypothyroid problems. Okay?
Absolutely. And I think that these tips are going to be something that whether you're on thyroid medication or they've hinted that you've got a thyroid problem or maybe they're just watching it, I think these tips are going to be for anyone across the board who may be experiencing just thyroid symptoms or if they actually have been diagnosed. I think you'll be able to take some of these tips and be able to run with them either way.
Yeah, no doubt about it. This question actually came from one of my patients, one of my new inquiries through my Thyroid Problems Doctor website. And it was a question that somebody that had asked me is, I just got diagnosed, what should I do? So these are the things that we would tell them.
Yeah.
So number one, I'm going to say one of the number one things you can do if you get diagnosed with hypothyroidism, more than likely you've been to you're at your medical doctor's and you're getting diagnosed, or you're at an endocrinologist's office and you're getting diagnosed. The number one thing to do is look for a functional medicine practitioner to help you. And the big piece of that is that in traditional medicine or allopathic medicine, it doesn't matter if you're going to a GP or an endocrinologist, the focus is on TSH and T4 and normalizing those values. And they're going to put you on thyroid medication and not be concerned about what causes hypothyroidism, and what are the things that led you to develop it. They're really just concerned about if you have it, and can we get your TSH and T4 values back to normal. And if they get that done, they're going to say, hey, life is good, you're fine, everything else is another condition. When in reality, we know that just isn't the case. There's a large percentage of people who do not develop euthyroidism or normal thyroid hormone physiology by just being put on T4.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's for patients to understand is that you may get put on thyroid hormone and you may feel good. Your symptoms may dissipate right away, but that doesn't mean that it's really fixing the underlying problem. You may feel good for a period of time, whether that's months, years, but down the road, if you don't address the underlying problem, something else is always going to surface. So whether you feel good already on it, it's always good to kind of get evaluated and figure out, well, what happened in the first place? Where was the breakdown in the chemistry that started the whole thing to begin with?
Right. 90% or more of the cases of hypothyroidism are caused by an autoimmune attack. And even that's not good enough. We need to figure out what was triggering the autoimmunity. Because if you don't address the autoimmune condition, then within probably 3 to 5 years of your hypothyroid diagnosis, you're probably going to develop a second or third autoimmune condition. So we need to address that. The second thing I think is really important underneath that, why to see a functional medicine practitioner, is just the comprehensiveness of lab work. Medical doctors typically only run TSH and T4. They just don't provide enough information about overall thyroid physiology. In a functional medicine practice, I would say the vast majority, if not all functional medicine practitioners, when they run a thyroid panel, are going to run a full thyroid panel, TSH, T4, T3, free T4, free T3, reverse T3, FBI, thyroid antibodies. They're going to run all of those things. And along with that, most functional medicine practitioners are going to run a comprehensive metabolic panel to look for clues as to why they have a hypothyroid condition. Is it inflammation? Is it blood sugar dysregulation? Is there markers in their blood chemistry that give some clues like anemia that may indicate why they have it? So I think that is probably another really important reason for somebody to reach out to find a functional medicine practitioner like myself or you
Mm-hmm.
or somebody else that they can find through numerous sites to help them.
Absolutely. I can 100% agree.
All right. So that's number one. Number one thing to do as soon as you find out as soon as you are diagnosed with a hypothyroid condition, look for a functional medicine practitioner who specializes in helping people with thyroid conditions. Number two, what would you say, Dr. Erica? What's a number two reason?
I think the easiest thing for people to change in their life is what they eat. And often the foods that you consume are extremely toxic to your metabolic system, your endocrine system, even your thyroid itself. So I would say getting off gluten is going to be huge, but it goes beyond just a gluten-free diet. You also need to eliminate dairy and soy and reduce the sugar. You want to go more on the anti-inflammatory. There's lots of different names out there: anti-inflammatory diet, paleo, ketogenic type of diet. But you want to be getting off those major foods that create a lot of inflammation in the body and create destruction down the road that just aren't healthy for you anyways.
Yeah, and I'm going to argue the point that the patient would argue. It's not easy to change your diet. And I agree. For a lot of people, it is not easy. I know you know that. Yeah. I know that. We talk to a lot of patients who just say, I can't change. I have to eat pasta. I'm Italian. I got to eat it. But while it's not the easiest thing, it is one of the, it's not easy maybe to do from an emotional standpoint, but it is a simple thing to do. It's the difference between buying one type of food versus another type of food. It's the difference between eating whole food versus processed food. And so it really isn't a hard concept to do as a manual process. From an emotional standpoint, it can be tough for a lot of people to transition to a healthier diet if they've been used to eating a lot of processed packaged foods for the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years or more.
Yeah, especially if you have that glutamorphine component where gluten actually is looked at like morphine in your body. When you try to get off of it, you're going to go through withdrawals. And I mean, even sugar does the same thing. I mean, it isn't easy changing the diet, but once you get over that hill of, clarity, you're going to feel so much better. And you're going to have less reactivity, especially if you're autoimmune. Gluten and dairy both have molecular mimicry to the thyroid and look very similar to it. So every single time you consume it, you may be creating more autoimmune reactions against your thyroid by just consuming it.
So if we had to have somebody look at a plate, right, and they're looking at their meal plate, because some people may not be familiar with what autoimmune diet means, even though we can Google those things: autoimmune diet, paleo diet, ketogenic diet. Essentially, the easiest thing the simplest way to look at this is to transition from what you're eating to a plate that kind of looks like if you drew a line down the middle of your plate, half of the plate vegetables, right? Raw, lightly steamed, cooked, but vegetables, green leafy vegetables as a primary source, about half your plate. You really want to shoot for, I tell my patients, about 10 servings of vegetables a day. And most people freak out like, what? That's a lot. I'm like, it's really not that hard to get that much. A salad in general could be 3 to 5 servings of vegetables depending on what you put in it. Yep. So just a nice sized salad is probably 2 servings of just greens at a minimum, and then all the vegetables you put on top of there could add another serving, 2 or 3. So half the plate vegetables. The other half of the plate I like to divide into halves, and one half of that should be a protein, some form of protein: lean meat, fish, chicken, veggies, stone fruit, nuts. If you can afford wild-caught fish or organically raised
grass-fed, definitely grass-fed if you can.
Get it. But if you can't, do the best you can with what you can afford. And if you're not sure from a vegetable, fruit standpoint or real food standpoint, they can always go to the www.environmentalworkersgroup.org, EWG.org, and they have the clean 15 and the dirty dozen, so you know what foods are better bought organic and which ones you can kind of get away without buying organic. market.
Absolutely. And that's a great website. Not to mention for food-wise, there's also a beauty product section on there where you can actually look up all your beauty products and see whether your face wash or your makeups or your lipsticks or anything of that, how carcinogen they are. They actually give them an A to F rating to see how toxic they really are in your body. So that's a great website.
And they do that with household cleaning products as well. So yeah, I think, and then that last quarter of the of that plate, that last quarter could mostly be whole food fats, things like eggs and olives and olive oil and nuts and nut butters and
avocados
and just healthy forms of fats. And then if you could draw a little sliver in there, then we could put our berries and some not processed carbohydrates, but more of the lower fiber fruit type things. But you can keep that a little bit smaller. If you can transition, if somebody who's diagnosed with hypothyroidism can transition from the standard American diet, which is primarily a lot of processed food today, to a diet that's more whole food, real food, and their plate kind of looks like that, that's really the direction they want to head. Would you agree?
I 100% agree. And most patients, when I initially do a consultation with them, I mention that stuff. And usually between the time I do the consultation and the next visit, without me even telling them to reduce that, they already have reduced it and they're already feeling better without even that recommendation. So that's easy stuff that you can make the modifications. It's just getting over that emotional, attachment to food.
Yeah, and I find it really is an emotional thing more than it is a physical thing. There's people say, well, eating healthy is hard. Well, not really. You just pick different foods, right? Just choose to buy something different. But there is that emotional connection with food that people just don't want to give up their cereal in the morning. Even though it has very little, if any, nutritional value, whether it's big media brainwashing or just it's a comfort, people want to have their cereal for breakfast and think, oh my gosh, how am I going to give this up? You'll give it up easy, but if you can put something else that's healthy and nutrition in its place, right?
Absolutely.
So definitely find a functional medicine practitioner is step one. Step two, start cleaning up your diet, right? Yep. And eat more of that whole food, real food diet. What would you say is the third thing that somebody could do to almost right away?
Lifestyle. There's so many different things, aspects of lifestyle that you could modify on your own. Stress level, that's a big one. Reducing stressors in your life, the emotional stressors. The other one is going to be toxic stressors. So a lot of thyroid patients are female, and women like to use beauty products and makeups and nail polish, and they all have a lot of chemicals that can harm the thyroid or block thyroid receptors. So, using that website we just talked about, looking at what beauty products you're using, and you don't have to go out and throw everything away that you have now, but as you run out of it, maybe replace it with something a little bit better. That over time could be a little bit cost, effective for you. So just looking at, the stuff that you use, and a lot of the beauty products are filled with estrogen type products that, mess with your estrogens that then can impact your thyroid downstream. So looking at those toxic stuff is, I think, big.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think we look at habits in our environment, see what's going on around us that we can change. We know that since 90% or more of the hypothyroid cases are autoimmune, and autoimmunity is typically driven by some excessive stress or chronic stress triggers, start looking at your life, look at your habits, look at your activities, look at the things you do on a daily basis that may be creating excessive amounts of stress in your life that may have triggered the autoimmunity. In some situations, it's an acute stressor that triggers the autoimmune response, and people know it. They go, I had a car accident, and ever since the car accident, I haven't been the same. I had my second child, and ever since I had my second child, I've had hypothyroid symptoms. I got a divorce about 6 months ago, and now all of a sudden I'm having all these hypothyroid symptoms. A lot of times there's this one major acute stressor that people can link. That's when my health changed. And whether it's that all by itself, or they had a series of chronic underlying stresses, and that major stress was just the tip that would push the button to push them over the edge. But it's usually some form of chronic life stressor. So, like you said, environmental stressors. What's going on in your environment? Are you in a toxic environment? Did you move into a new house with mold or moisture problems? Did you have a recent flood or leak that could be a trigger for it? Do you have some type of emotional stressors that you're constantly around, whether it's your spouse or your finances or your kids that are just putting you over the edge? What are your habits? I mean, do you stay up late all night and get very little sleep and do that on a regular basis because you're on Facebook or watching TV or movies, or just staying up late to do a lot of work? Lack of sleep, whether acute or chronic, could be a major trigger to immune and autoimmune issues and hypothyroid conditions. Are you an exerciser? Are you exercising excessively, too much, overdoing it, and not allowing for rest and recovery? That can do it. Are they eating, like we talked about, just a ton of terrible food, and that's doing it? So look at the things in your life that are potentially causing the issue. And I tell my patients, and I'm sure you do the same, because they may not notice or think they have any bad habits, right? I usually say, give me 3 days in your life. Tell me just 3 days in a row, write out what time you get up, what you ate, what your routine was throughout the day, from start to the end of the day, and write that out for 3 days in a row. And most people think it's everything's the same every day. Good. Put the stuff down. But what they typically see as they write down is, man, I don't have a lot of things I'm doing here for me to improve my health. Most of the things I'm doing in here aren't good for myself. I didn't realize I have 4 or 5 cups of coffee a day. I didn't realize I really only had 4 or 5 hours of quality sleep. I didn't realize how much my spouse or my work or my job annoys me and gets me irritated. I didn't realize that until I actually wrote all those things down. And those are, once you see them and they become a reality that you're aware of, then you can start to address them. You can change your sleeping habits, and you can change your dietary patterns. You can start to look at your spouse or your significant other and figure out why they're annoying you so much. Maybe it's what you're doing, not what they're doing, or maybe a combination of both. So I think definitely looking at your daily habits, your daily routines, and the stressors in your life. Those are the things that whether you seek a functional medicine practitioner or not, those are ultimately the things that are contributing to their hypothyroidism, their autoimmune condition, and those are the things that are going to have to be addressed. So it makes our life a little easier when we have somebody who's educated. They've said, okay, look, I've already done this, this, and this. I feel a bit better. I still have some challenges. Then we can get kind of right to work fine-tuning some of what's wrong. In a lot of cases, people are coming to us and they don't know that these are things that they should be looking at and doing, and they're things they could do without our help.
Absolutely. And if they've already made those necessary changes, once they come in, we can get right down to work with, let's look at gut function. Let's see how well you're digesting your food. Let's look at liver detoxification. Let's test for pathogens if we have any of that going on in the body, and then supporting methylation, genetic stuff if we have to, and get right to work to that, as opposed to just starting at the basics, which takes a while for some patients to get them just through the basics.
Right. And we have to do the basics before we start jumping to genetics and things like that, right? We want to work with basic concepts. So if you can start to work on these things before you reach out to Dr. Eric or myself or another functional medicine practitioner, those first couple of weeks of our care, we can actually get started right away with doing some of the work. What would you say to somebody about how to really go about this, though? Should they jump in and eliminate everything, or try and cut everything out that maybe they're doing wrong, or should they do it more in a stepwise, one at a time fashion? What's your recommendations there?
Definitely one at a time. I mean, you want to make a list of the ones that are going to be from the easiest things to give up, maybe down to the hardest, and just start with some of the easy ones. And you can probably do a couple of those at a time, but then when you get down to some of the harder ones, you want to make sure that you take time to do that and you don't rush in it. Because if you jump in and you eliminate everything, you're going to be miserable. You're going to be unhappy. and you're going to give up after 2 or 3 days. I mean, I see it all the time. I mean, you see it this time of year, the New Year's, when everybody wants to lose weight. They go on an 800 calorie diet. They're only eating vegetables, and they're exercising, 24/7, and they give up quickly. I mean, you want to baby steps within your tolerance. If you feel good, move on to the next one.
Right. Yeah, just one step at a time. Get confidence in the one thing that you're changing, and if you're going to give up a habit, especially a bad one, you have to really fill that bad habit with a better habit, right?
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Just to say, well, I'm a smoker, I'm not going to smoke is a great thing, but most people fail there because they don't have anything to take that place.
Mm-hmm.
Stressed out, they usually reach for a cigarette. So if you don't put another something else in the place of the cigarette when there's a stressful event, you're going to revert back to the cigarette in a short period of time. So when you're stressed, have some other outlet, whether it's meditation, you go for a walk, you go work out, you go socialize with somebody else, find something else that you can replace the bad habit or the habit you're trying to get rid of with a good habit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So I think we got that covered.
Yeah.
Any final parting thoughts for today's podcast?
I mean, just don't wait till it's too late. I mean, that's a big key. I mean, I see it where somebody's hypothyroid for, 20, 30 years and they did great. And then all of a sudden they hit menopause and it's just, everything goes downhill. But if the real problem would have been addressed back when they got diagnosed, it would have been a lot easier to guide them down that path to optimal wellness, as opposed to them spiraling down to have everything wrong in their body. And it's being proactive about your life. Don't wait till it's, out of control.
So I think that brings up a point we can talk about real quick is, somebody's going to get diagnosed with hypothyroidism. They're going to get Synthroid, levothyroxine. They're going to feel better because if they weren't making thyroid hormone previously, giving them some thyroid hormone is definitely going to be beneficial. But the point you made that they could go 5, 10, 15, 20 years and feel okay, and then all of a sudden they hit menopause, and all of a sudden now everything is just a mess, and they can't seem to get their thyroid physiology under control. Somebody might say, well, the medications work for 20 years. Why did they work, and why all of a sudden have they not worked? I think that comes down to a couple points. One, they still probably had an autoimmune condition. Mm-hmm. The medication was supporting them with enough thyroid hormone to get by. They may have felt better, but they may not have been well with the thyroid hormone medication. And then they added another level of stress to their system. And so chronic stress with another stressor in menopause and the big change in physiology around hormones is a major stressor for a lot of people. That was the match or the spark that triggered this bigger immune response. And I see that, and I'm sure that's what you're referring to when you're saying, hey, you may do good for 10, 15, 20 years, and you can. We both have had patients, but that doesn't mean that you don't still have an underlying immune process going on that's creating damage to tissues. And because it's a slow, progressive process, a person may not realize that they don't feel as well as they could. They don't know what good feels like anymore because they live it day in, day out. But as you know, once they come to somebody like you or I, and we start to make small life changes like, hey, why don't we clean up the diet? Why don't we work on this stressor or that stressor? They are amazed at how much better they can feel in a short period of time. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those people are like, why didn't I do this sooner? Well, because you weren't feeling bad enough to take action. You look at your friends, you look at your family, everybody around your age is having similar symptoms, so you can assume that this is normal. It's not normal. Most people just aren't aware of how good can be until somebody starts working with them to improve their function.
Absolutely.
So let's wrap this one up, and we'll let everybody come back, listen to it, and put any questions that they have regarding this podcast under wherever they're watching this at. Mm-hmm. I'm always available at www.chronicconditionrecoverycenter.com and www.thyroidproblemsdoctor.com. Those are both of my websites that you can reach me at. I'm available on Twitter at Dr. Volcavage and Facebook at chronicconditionrecoverycenter.com. So you can always find me there if you have questions. Reach out to me via email or messaging on any one of those sites. And Dr. Erica, you can be found at
brainandbodyhealthcenter.com. You can find us on Facebook at brainandbodyhealthcenter.com, and you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Dr. Evan and Erica. And again, just like with him, if you find me on that medium, don't hesitate to, make a comment, ask questions. We're here to help. We want to thank you for listening and share it with people that, may want to hear this, or somebody who's just interested in learning more about thyroid.
Excellent. So another good podcast in the books. We'll do this again next week.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Yeah, you too.